Okay. Thank you. So I switch my English into English. So thank you very much for, first of all, thank you very much for Katerina for inviting me here, and such an honor to propose my recent researches among these Diagnoses de Bergson. So, and thank you also for other French scholars of SAB, Société des Amis de Bergson. And thank you. I would like to thank you also to my Japanese colleagues, member of PBJ, Project Bergson Japan, especially the Shin Abiko and Fujita, the founders of this project, and I'm very honored to be a member of this and the project leader of this. And then this is the very end of the fourth cycle of PBJ, which started in 2019, and we have already made these events or symposiums. And especially, perhaps Hisashi, I have forgot to mention the Fechner one, this one, was noting because so in this era of the replication crisis in psychology today, so some psychologists start to noticing the importance, or is worthwhile revisiting Bergson, criticizing Fechner. So it's very important, and also in this small workshop we have invited a German a specialist of German scholar, German literature, and also the contemporary scientists of neurocognitive sciences. So these and Hisashi Fujita, who is a specialist of Bergson. So these combination cannot be possible without Bergson, the very rich figure that enables this combination. So, first of all, today's talk will be based on my recent published book, made out of time, an invitation to Bergson's philosophy of time. And I quickly list up some features of my book. So this is a book about the philosophy of time, but the characteristic of this is multi-scale theory of time. So that means that the time is not unique and single or linear sequence, but there are pluralities of different scales and different series. And then approaching the problem of consciousness and mind from this multi-time scale perspective. So if you reinvent the notion of time, you can approach it totally differently to Okay. Peut-être ça se continue comme ça. So okay. So the fourth. So I reinterpreted the pure memory question and also the motor memory can be reinterpreted. And thanks to these two, bonjour, to these notions, we can reposit the famous dichotomy of Bergsonian philosophy, that is two types of memory. And finally, I approached the question of freedom. So let me show my book, chapters of my book. So it is made of 8 chapters, including the introductory chapters. So first one is the preparation for that, and the first 3 chapters is devoted to the notion of extended memory and the Malta timescale structure, inspired by Bergson. And the 4th and the 5th chapter is dedicated to the motor memory and space. And the 6th chapter is about the conscious mind made out of these 2 memories. And finally, I tackled the question of the time and freedom. So I'm saying the notion of the time scale. So what is time scale? So first of all, I need to you need to pay attention to, this is not epistemic time scale, but intrinsic time scale. And this is not a single universe absolute time, but inherently local and plural. Time is not a Newtonian absolute time. And if you take different scale, so you need a different strategy to solve the new problem of proper to this particular scale, time scale. And measurement experience are complementary. This is not not a question of the one-side criticism. So this is not that the bonjour. So you need the measurement structure of the time scale. And of course, internal intrinsic experience, phenomenal conscious experience is also important. So you need to combine to fully understand the nature of time in total, at large. So, and it is well known that there are spatial scales. There are a variety of spatial scales, but Bergson is considering about temporal or different time scales. So, for example, these are the examples of how our phenomenal conscious experience depends on time scales. For example, fluorescent light flashes out in Japan, I don't know in France, but at least at 100 Hertz, so 100 times per second. So a human time recognition resolution is defined as 20 milliseconds. So it appears to be constantly lit, but fly's time scale, fly's resolution is much much more minute than us, so tinier. So for them, the same fluorescent light appear to be blinking, and the shooting star is Bergson's famous example, so very famous one, and also there is a lot the maximum so upper restriction of the time scale. So the too slow, something too slow, it cannot be perceived. So something too fast cannot be perceived, and something too slow cannot be perceived. So our conscious experience is not how to say in the air, but this is embedded in this certain region, temporal region of this universe. We cannot perceive anything. We perceive only this very particular restricted area of temporal scales. So why is it important to consider this multi-scale structure of time? So for example, this is only merely one example of application. For example, traditional way of posing question in philosophy of time, you might heard of that these questions: does the past exist? The past no longer exists, and the future does not yet exist. So these two are not existing. So the time emerges from nothing to nothing, blah blah blah, something like that. But from multi-time scale framework, if you once acquire this framework of time, the way of questioning will be different. So these questions will be would be, how to say, mal posé, so well, badly posed. So from the multi-time scale structure, the present has a certain breadth, and this breadth is not singular. So there are plural or different breadths of present. So in the multi-time scale structure, the division of tenses is relativized to the scale. That means that the breadth of present varies depending on the scale, because the breadths of present are different. So whether a certain point in time in the past also varies depending on the scale. What is past is also depending on which scale you are talking about. So therefore, it is meaningless to ask the question of whether the past simplicitel exists or not. This is not a question to pose. So the answer, because the answer depends on the scale, which scale you are discussing about. So it is possible that a past moment in one scale may still be the present in another scale. This happens in the multi-time scale structure. So I quote two sentences from Bergson. En réalité, il n'y a pas un rythme unique de la durée. On peut imaginer bien des rythmes différents. C'est vraiment, it's a very famous one. And the second one is from the lecture, l'idée du temps, histoire de l'idée du temps. So, je viens de parler de deux durées, et la mienne est celle de la matière, mais entre la matière et moi, je dois supposer beaucoup d'existences intermédiaires. Comme ça. So, these different durées sont indefinite in number. So, and the question is, this very complex structure, multi-time structure, is given a priori? No, this is not. So Bergson is talking about memory. This temporal structure, very complex structure, is not given a priori, but made through an, I would say, evolution of temporal scale. So in a very important passage in modern memory, he says, la force intérieure qui permet à l'être de se dégager du rythme de l'écoulement des choses, de retenir de mieux en mieux le passé pour influencer de plus en plus profondément l'avenir, c'est-à-dire élargissement de la time scale, c'est-à-dire enfin au sens spécial que nous donnons à ce mot, à sa mémoire. So I take this definition very important. So memory in special sense, he is explicitly, deliberately denoting this importance. So this picture I take several times. So the matter has a very simple one single time scale, but with apparition of these living beings, the temporal structure is gradually being complex and extended. So this operation of extending the time scale itself, of the structure itself, is, in my book, I call it extension memory to avoid the confusion. And so the word memory is very utilized in Bergson philosophy in very different ways. So I coined this expression to denote this particular notion of a memory. So in this picture, intelligence seems like a kind of deviated reaction. So time scale is gradually developed, and so it becomes indefinitely delayed. So in between this action and reaction, so in between this very large scale of present, you have a place, you have a space, you have a room for reorganizing the temporal structure, and you have an intellect, and you have words, and you have concept, and you have inventions and creations, something like that. So this is also the very famous quote from Bergson: les questions relatives au sujet à l'objet, à leur distinction, à leur union, doivent se poser en fonction du temps plutôt que de l'espace. So we need to put the question not in terms of space. So if you put the space, the question would be entities, and how can they interact, even though these are totally different in nature, and how can mind emerge from bodies, blah, blah, blah. But you need to put the question in time. So the mind and body are situated in different scales, but contemporaneous. So the mind-body interaction will be inter-time scale interaction. And emergent effects from this time scale gaps should be considered and investigated. So the question, the position of the question will be totally different if you see in the light of the matter-time structure. So I put these pictures in and also all conferences, but I try to, how to say, so disseminate these notions to the scientists and our colleagues. So, for example, so pluralism of the durée is not about not only the external or horizontal timescale gaps. So humans timescale and ticks timescale, cats timescales or matters different timescales are different, but also in a single human being there is a horizontal, vertical timescale gaps. So different, we have a different timescales. So I put in this book this picture as my current result. So I articulated for these in these 4 levels of timescales. So before entering the context, I would like to show that multi-time scale is not invented by me. This is very famous approach now, so very growing approach in the very different scientific disciplines. For example, the biology, of course, and earth science, or different, of course, neurosciences. And so what I would like to do is that this new approach, so the scientist is starting to notice that the time is not a single one, but it is taking into account the plurality of the time scales and interaction among them. So, but we have Bergson, and I believe that Bergson is a very early founder of this very notion, so plurality of multi-time scale structure. So I would like to, not saying the philosophical foundation, but grounding, not such big things, but we can open Bergson to these scholars or scientists and to possibly inspire them, or maybe, I don't know, but I believe it is worthwhile to doing so. So context. So today I will focus on the first part of my book, so I cannot speak everything. So about qualia or consciousness. So in these days, maybe some of you will know about this situation, but there are a bunch of books published by scientists, not philosophers. So this conscious science of consciousness is very developing, rapidly developing in these decades. So, and especially the Tononi is, the Tononi is a very mathematical oriented person, but he wrote a book with Massimini, and this book, Nulla di più grande, is not unfortunately translated into English, but I think this is very important because Massimini gives us a more, how to say, living examples about brain sciences. So, and not only neurosciences, there are new approaches from the biological or evolution perspectives, and they also they are not properly said philosophers but scientists. So there are new approaches emerging about consciousness, and this is the main focus of today. So, but this is not single context. So I have also philosophy of time as my background, and so you know, the Marc de Gaulle has founded the analytical tradition of philosophy of time, and Bergson is also almost at the same time the totally different tradition, and we have this characterizes this position as a tense versus aspect, so which I will talk in later. And other, I will go quickly. So for the other context, we have, of course, Barry Dayton, which is a proponent of philosophy of temporal experience. And there is also a context of panpsychism, which is very rapidly growing attention. And so we have a philosophy of memory. There's these colleagues in Grenoble University, where the Center for Philosophy of Memory is situated. And also we have questions of artificial intelligence or robotics. So Professor Tani's robotics is based on the Malta time scale. So in order to investigate the possibility of the emergent intention of the robot itself. So it is very important things. So you can see how these theories are saying. This is not written by me. I asked the ChatGPT to resume these notions because he is better than me. But anyway, well, define modern. But these theoretical things, they are kind of a good thing. And so what I would like to say is the question of the very emergence of qualia. This is crucial and the hardest part of the question remain unsolved, unfortunately. So I'm not denying that all these scientific researches I very admire and I love them, but from philosophical standpoint, how in fact the qualia emerge from these physiological or physical circumstances. So you can have several options. So you eliminate the very existence of the subjective experience. Then I don't take this, and you remain a simple correlation. It's not sufficient, for example, of course, for philosophers. And a priori dualism is not a real solution. You just supposing the existence of the subjective self. And surprisingly, from the philosopher's view, from philosopher's eyes, the epiphenomenalism is still de facto standard for these recent scientists. Not saying explicitly saying that, but they presuppose this epiphenomenalism type of explanation. And of course, you know well, Bergson is very severe criticized about this epiphenomenalist explanation. So now we know very well the very deficiency of this theory. For example, the causal impotence. Bergson, I like this quote from Bergson, a very cute one. So, as if the consciousness is a student and made stood at outside the classroom, and the second criticism, the famous criticism of the evolutionary usefulness, that is also pointed out by Bergson in the Histoire de la théorie de la mémoire. And the third one is very most important one, and a question of the material. So what is the material of our subjective experience? I call in this book this the magic lamp problem. So does the brain really produce or generate or cause consciousness? So Bergson says, I quote, "I do not understand, I shall never understand that it draws things miraculous power of changing itself into representation of things." So Bergson is very much criticizing this very point. So if you say the brain causes walking, it's okay, or brain causes speech, it's okay, because they are muscular motions triggered by the nervous system. But if you say brain causes red qualia, or your red subjective experience, is simply a category mistake. So if one were to attempt to explain the true emergence of something new, different in nature from matter, it is necessary not only to rely on formal correlations, but also to provide an at least hypothetical explanation of the material for that new phenomenon. So otherwise, nature would be getting a free lunch to make our conscious self. So we need to provide. And Bergson, you know already, so he does not admit ex creature ex nihilo. So this is why I call this question magic lamp problem. So the very founder of this epiphenomenalism, that is Huxley, Thomas Henry Huxley, he already conscious of this deficiency, and he wrote in his book, the state of consciousness comes about as a result of the irritating nervous issue is just an accountable as the appearance of the jinn when Aladdin rubbed his lamp. So this is not an explanation at all. So you need to provide with some explanation about. And the Bergson also uses the magic wand or Aladdin's lamp expressions in this context. So, Bergson ce faisant, so I quote so Bergson's idea about the collaboration with these different disciplines of philosophers and also scientists. Mais une philosophie de ce genre ne sera pas un jour, elle ne pourra se constituer que par l'effort collectif et progressif de bien des penseurs et de bien des observateurs, c'est-à-dire scientistes. So my aim is to resurrect Bergson as an active player. Now, in this context of contemporary debates, so to restore and set Bergson in motion is not simply a nostalgic act or for a vintage car. Bergson's philosophy is like I would say a lost branch of evolution of ideas. So it is a branch that could have given rise to a different lineage, which will be very fruitful in this current context, but unfortunately has been unable to do so. So this is my total intention to do these researches of this. And finally, as mentioned, thanks by Katerina, my book will be our book will be appear, and in this, Paul-Antoine and Ellie's manifesto, Kyoto Manifesto is included in finally in the original place in English. So, okay, so now I'm getting into the question of qualia. So which I will talking about is this part of my structure. So my talk is going from in this itinerary. So starting from the temporal structure, what is temporal structure? And I will quickly see what is contraction. This is Bergson theory, explains his theory, and image and system, passing through the theory of the famous theory, which he developed in chapter 1 of matter memory. And I go back to the données immédiates to revisit the notion of multiplicity. It is very important for me. And finally, the concepts of the deneutralization as of matter. So first, the temporal structure. What is temporal structure? So Bergson said that, I quote, the subjectivities of sensible quality is due precisely to the fact that our consciousness, which begins by being only memory, prolonges a plurality of moments into each other, contracting them into single intuition. And this is not a simple, how to say, fragile armchair discussion argument, but he quotes very definite numbers, so 400 trillion on the second, which matter has, and in contrast, we have only 2 milliseconds. I put 20 milliseconds because 2 milliseconds is a right number for audition, because at that time Wexner has developed has put forward this number, 2 milliseconds, but now these days we have vision has a different temporal resolution, which is from 20 to 30. So I put in 20 to 30 milliseconds. So, but anyway, the important thing is that he put the very particular, so very precise number of this structure. So the material moment has also defined as its own temporal resolution, and we also. So two moments are different, and two moments are different not arbitrarily, but based on the natural structure. So based on the natural phenomenon itself in question. So what distinguishes Bergson's thought from the philosophy of fluidism in general is that he recognized these concrete articulations and structures inherent in events. So Bergsonian durée is not a simple, plain, amorph continuity, but it has its inner temporal articulation and structure. And this is said to be, by him, the fundamental conditions of mobility. I quote, au lieu de connaître que la tortue fait des pas de tortue, pas de tortue et Achille des pas d'Achille, et de sorte qu'après un certain nombre de ces actes sont indivisibles. Donc chaque step, each step is indivisible. It's true, but so this whole course is not a structure, not indivisible. It is structured and articulated. So, and that impossible. In the same context, he is mentioning about the impossibility of instant. So, in context, instant means abstract mathematical ideal point of time, which has no zero grades. But on the other hand, a moment we should have denote that the tiniest breadth of time, which is concrete and emotion grounded unit of time. So any moment has a certain breadth of time based on the motion's own structure. This is the point. So this is a very crucial basic notion of his temporal structure, and which gives us a very complex complexity of his multi-time scale structure. So according to the contraction theory, how does a sensible quality emerge? This is our question. So Bergson is better, gives us a better explanation or understanding about this or not. Let us see. So just by collecting the first, hypothesis is that just by collecting the diluted qualities pre-existing in material vibration, because if it is true that Bergson is mentioning about matter has its own diluted qualities, so il suffit que leur hétérogénéité soit assez diluée, en quelque sorte, peut devenir, de notre point de vue, pratiquement négligeable, pragmatically negligible. So it is true that he is admitting the proto-quality, so to say, in the matter already. So, but if the explanation is that, I don't see this very plausible or sufficient, because this is very much like a panqualist approach today we have. So panqualityism is this one is coined by Feigl, if I'm not wrong, in 1970s. So this is a very new position, and is a variant of a modern panpsychism. And according to this, all entities in the universe possesses intrinsic quality, so proto-quality, from which our subjective quality will be made. And but this position is famous for its it being criticized for its circular reasoning. I'm not saying that every circular reasoning is bad in itself, because the question is about the very origin of our consciousness. So the question about origin is somehow, I'd say, fatality to end up this kind of circular reasoning. But the question is whether there are independent grounds of the to suppose that these proto-qualities are there in material world. So if we were to place qualities within matter just because you want to solve the problem, that would be a trivial solution. So it would be criticized. But if you have some independent plausibility to suppose that matter has some intrinsic quality, that would make some different effect. So Bergson, he himself was very aware of this top-down explanation, that is anthropomorphism. This is quote from durée and simultanéité. So, on réunira peut-être à l'emploi du mot, or in this context, he is putting a memory into matter. So something, a parallel discussion is going on here. And, mes points de besoin peut se représenter une chose qui dure, de prendre sa mémoire à soi, de la transporter dans la matière, même atténuée. C'est pas bonne chose. C'est la marche inverse qu'il faut suivre, ce qu'il a dit. This is what he said. So it is not a good way to assume that matter has a phenomenal properties just because you want to explain the riddle of the images of a phenomenal experience. So which way to go? So there are another possibility to interpret his approach is that a neutral monist approach. So in the above context, Bergson introduces the notion of memory into matter, redefined in a neutral, operative, so to speak, way, without any anthropomorphic connotation, which is defined as just to connect the one moment to the next moment. This is not a psychological definition. This is a very operative expression. This definition itself does not imply psychological or physical nature. So it is memory, but not personal memory, external to what it retains. They're distinct from the past, blah, blah, blah. And he's saying that this can be sufficient. to explain the matter. So it should not be depicted that matter has quality from the beginning. So what would be the fundamental block of Bergsonian universe from which matter and consciousness can be derived from this neutral monist approach? Of course, this is the part you know very well. So world is made of images. From this, I'm going to the image and the system part. So image, so which are neither material nor spiritual in themselves. So this is a very neutral monist approach. And matter and perception are differentiated in terms of system. So the word is not whatever. This is very important word, which is selected by him. And which are ways in which images are interrelated. So this means that system of images called matter or science system, when chaque image varie pour elle-même dans la mesure bien définie où elle subit l'action réelle des images environnementales. On the other hand, the system of images is called perception or consciousness when it varie pour une seule dans la mesure variable où elle réfléchisse l'action possible de cette image privilégiée. So the thing itself are not material, neither subjective. So the same images can be attributed into these different systems, something like this. Okay, so Bergsonian neutral monism is the final answer. I need to put some nuance on that, because this theory sounds like very much neutral monism, but we need to put some following caveat attention. So first, this neutral monism is not a thing ontology, but interaction ontology. So as you already know very well, in the chapter 4 of the matter of memory, toute division de la matière encore, I'm quoting, encore indépendant ou compte absolument déterminé est une division artificielle. So there are two ways in which these interactions, not things, are organized. And system theory does not focus on emergence of quality. This is also somehow we need to nuance this interpretation, because this image theory or system theory is treating about extension of our perceptual world. So our perception is not inside in us, but in the perceptual world. So this is a question of extension, not as it is quality. So we need to combine somehow the contraction theory and the system theory in tandem. We might understand both the extensional aspect and the qualitative aspect of our consciousness. So this is also the very Bergsonian point. Our consciousness is not in us, not in an extensional way. So we consciousness extended toward the world and also qualitative. So how to understand not as somehow story, but this is I believe this shows some very important way of understanding the natural world. So to solve this problem, I revisited the notion of multiplicity, because as you all know very well, quantity quality problem is not first discussed in matter memory. Of course, so already in temps immédiat, two multiplicities are called qualitative and quantitative respectively. But you need to pay attention that similarly, the qualitative multiplicity is not defined by its content, that is qualitative elements, but it is defined by its operations, that is qualitative distinction. This is very important part. So in the context of where he introduces this very notion of multiplicity, I quote, bref, il faudrait admettre deux espèces de multiplicité, deux sens possibles du mot distingué. Voilà. So there are two things different. That is not, he is not saying that. There are two different ways of distinguishing the word. So, deux conceptions, l'une qualitative et de l'autre quantitative, de la différence entre la même et l'autre. So Bergson is not saying that there are two kinds of things in nature which are inherently qualitative in one part and the quantitative in the other part. So Bergson's duality is not based on the so-called intrinsic definite fixed nature of entities, but a multiplicity is defined by how its neutral elements are distinguished from one another in the midst of their interaction, regardless of its intrinsic property. It is whatever. So regardless of the intrinsic properties that each element possesses. So, and this is not a coincidence because he deliberately uses this operation dualism because he's using this also in defining the space. Car, I quote, car il n'y a guère d'autre définition possible de l'espace, c'est ce qui nous permet de distinguer l'une de l'autre plusieurs sensations identiques et simultanées. Voilà. Donc, this is not the space which defines the quantity, but the quantitative distinction defines space. So there's no a priori special things. There's no a priori extensive things. So the interactions are neutral. So how to distinguish, distinguish defines the which should be treated. So one material, two operations. So the universe is full of neutral interactions, which are psychophysically neutral in themselves. And but there are two distinct operations which are irreducible to each other. Therefore, saying the contraction convert quantitative matter. Matter is quantitative, and it converts it into qualitative sensation is not precisely correct. So rather, something of neutral is given, which is interactions. And we call it matter because it can be well grasped only in its quantitative behavior. And the contraction converts it into something that requires qualitative dimensions of distinction. And we call it sensible quality because of that. So always the qualitative or quantitative is after how these types of distinction is posed. So there's also a question mal posé, so or badly posed question. If you pose a question in an entity-wise manner, then you need to add something new over and above the material universe to explain the emergence of qualitative sensation, consciousness, because in matter there's no consciousness, so you need to add something. But this leads you to a very hard problem, magic lamp problem. But if you pose the question via notion of multiplicities, we just saw, then you don't need to solve the material problem since the material, which is always interaction, is already given in nature. So from this investigation of multiplicity, this is the trick. So this is why this part I deliberately extend Bergson's notion. So I'm extending Bergson's rail. So you can criticize or reject of this idea, but let me try. So consider the neutral distinguishability space. Not so before the qualitative or quantitative. So there's the possibility of distinction. So in the case of electromagnetic wave A and electromagnetic wave B, so mutually physical waves are colliding and interfering with each other, if the frequency of A is even slightly different, the result will be different. So physical interaction thus defines the maximum temporal resolution in the universe. So tiniest, the minimum, maybe I should say minimum. So the tiniest, the finest, the temporal resolution is defined by physical interaction. This is the most minute in the world. However, this interaction is only utilizing a quantitative dimension of distinguishability space. In other words, qualitative dimension is pragmatically negligible. So suppose that you put horizontal x-axis as a quantitative distinguishability and horizontal y-axis as a qualitative dimension of distinction. So this leads us to this image. So these two has a same structure of distinguishability space, and these two are of course observable because this is a quantitative differentiation, so we can measure and quantify. But when an electromagnetic wave hits a living organism such as us, such as human, the minute difference in the frequency of A is not recognized. This is a temporal coarse graining. We have not such a tiny subtle differentiation in the temporal dimension. So when quantitative distinguishability is insufficient, is not sufficient, the dimension of qualitative distinguishability, the vertical axis, can be deployed to compensate for this deficiency. So since our available external observation is always only handle quantitative dimensions, so sensory quality inevitably unfold in the internal or unobservable domain from the outside, that is first-person experiential domain. So this transformation of distinguishability space explains at the same time the emergence of quality and the reason for why the quality is only internally perceived, so not externally measurable. Okay, so I show you this movement again. So I'm not saying that this distinguishability space is a priori given, because that is why, because I'm saying about the transformation. So it is on, so for among material or physical interaction, the nature itself has at that time only this very thin structure of, so almost quantitative measurement, distinguishability. But as I said, so Bergson has as a very notion of extension memory, that is, our temporal structure is gradually developed in the history of this universe. So this is achieved, this qualitative dimension, which is vertical in this image, is achieved by nature in itself to solve this problem of distinguishability. Okay, so let me capture it. So the panpsychistic solution will be a circular argument unless the independent reason is given. So, and we tried another option, which is that is the neutral monism solution. So emergence should be considered in two manners: and a material on the one hand, and a distinction on the second hand. So regarding the material, in neutral monism, which considers neutral interaction as its material, and there's no need for addition of qualitative entity. You need to prepare. No need for preparing these different entities, but still, I need to put add, because there is an emergence. So a kind of augmentation of material is necessary. However, the interaction of the whole universe is already given as a material whole universe. how to obtain the addition. There's no way to search about that. But that's where time comes into play in the Bergsonian philosophy. This is the way I love this point. So because extension memory brings a larger time scale, so it increases the amount of interaction that can be handled at once. So before the extension, so the universe, the physical universe is only using a very thin breadth of time, but thanks to extension, you can handle at the same time plurality of interactions. So this is a difference. And the contraction contracts these plurality of moments. So regarding this distinction, if we consider the entirety of distinguishability, that is this space which I called, and think of qualitative distinguishability as compensating for this reduced resolution of quantitative distinguishability, there's no need for addition. So this approach is also consistent with Bergson's view that qualitative distinctions cannot be directly translated into quantitative distinctions. Maybe it might seem to be similar to how complex number cannot be directly compared to with real numbers. So the 4 + 1, 2i is larger or smaller than a4. This is not the question. Okay, so, and finally, so the final point is deneutralization, because Bergson has another meaning of neutrality, as mentioned by Arno in the last week. So matter has a neutralized consciousness. So I quote, extended matter regarded as a whole is like a consciousness where everything balances, s'équilibre, and compensates and neutralizes everything else. No doubt also the material universe itself is a kind of consciousness in which everything compensates and neutralizes everything else. So deneutralization, so material world is characterized as neutralized. So deneutralization makes subtraction in spatial dimension and causes our subjective perception. So this is also a famous part, and I quote the last part. It extracts from the whole that is real and the part that is virtual. And it chooses and finally disengages that what it interested. So perception is this perception disengages from the material world to the what is interesting for this animal. So which is caused by the delay in temporal dimension. I'm connecting the sentences. So deneutralization makes subtraction in spatial dimension, which is caused by the delay in temporal dimension. So this is very hard to find, but I think this is very important sentence. So I read the last sentence. Et le fond seulement que l'action réelle passe et que l'action virtuelle demeure. So passe et demeure. C'est la différenciation. So it's a differentiation of the temporal delay. Okay. So more delay, you keep this longer time. So perception is detached from the rest of the whole universe by transitioning to a higher time scale. So you passing to the next level of the time scale. So the word neutralized is a very important word, but he uses this word from the time and free will, and always he's using that about the compensation of the two different opposite things. Or interactions, say. So these images which I showed you earlier is not a very good picture. So we need to say that this matter system has a very smallest time scale, and it compensates instantly action reaction. So this is neutralized. So there's no consciousness there. But thanks to extension memory, so the nature has acquired a larger time scale that can use a plurality of instants. That is more. That means that more delay. So thanks to this delay, you can detach, you can disengage some part of this interaction from the material universe. Material universe is always neutralized, but how animals have, living beings can select and disengage these several interesting things. This is the way he uses time, I believe. Sorry, I'm talking very much. So this is a quote I already quoted. So la phrase antérieure, qui permet à l'être de se dégager du rythme de l'écoulement des choses. So this means that moving toward the larger time scale, you can, this kind of selection and this kind of detachment. And also this épaisseur du présent, so this breadth of time, you can contract and made it qualitative distinction on the upper level. So this is what I did in this section. Okay. So first I put the question in time, and second, contraction theory, it uses a time scale gap. So there are different time scales there, and a contraction uses this time scale gap. And then I visited imaginary system in order to try a neutral monist approach in understanding. So there, where we found that interaction ontology is crucial, and the relational differences also articulating the world. And then further, we go back to the notion of multiplicity. There also you find that there's no rigid intrinsic nature, but distinct way of distinction differences differentiate these two multiplicities. From that, I made some notion of transformation of distinguishability space. This is my extension. But thanks to that, I feel I can understand more precisely the notion of deneutralization, which Bergson develops at some part and very important sentences in where he talks about emergence of consciousness. So matter remains in a single time scale, which causes a neutralization. All the interactions are quasi instantly fulfilled, so there's no delay, so there's no consciousness. But extension memory pushes up the time scale. So then some interaction can be delayed on the upper time scale, and due to the lack of quantitative temporal resolution in return, so qualitative dimension is revealed or deployed. This is my hypothesis. Okay, that was first part, and don't worry, I'm ending very quickly. So I have the second and the third, but I just very quickly mention. So this was a very tiniest part of our consciousness, that is sensible quality. This is element of our consciousness. Of course, Bergson has durée. We have not single quality. We have plenty, a multiplicity of these qualities make a flow, conscious flow. So this is where I'm talking about this structure. So first of all, system define the time. So in chapter 3 of Modern Memory, Bergson introduces my present as defining by the sensory motor system, sensory motor structure. My body receives input from the environment and returns output to the environment. It takes time. It takes a definite time. So tick's body has takes different time. So it is designated to take certain amount of time. That is why my present has a stable breadth. In this book, this is referred to as level 2. I quote, mon présent est donc à la fois sensation et mouvement. Et finally, I quote again, mon présent consiste dans un système combiné de sensations et de mouvements. Mon présent est par essence, central moteur. So the width of that can be retained without thinking back. This constitutes our breadth of present. This is very definite amount of time, which will be concretely will be the 0.5 to 2 or 3 seconds. So this is very short. And penetration, of course, if you're talking about the interpenetration or mutual penetration is a very important notion. So we should pay attention to the repeated expression mutual. So it means not only that, for example, the reverberation of the previous sounds affects the following sound, but also because it's mutual, the reverse. That means that the following sound affects the previous sound. So this reminds me of the post-diction phenomena just recently found by scientists. So I don't have much time up to explain this phenomena, but the post-diction is our brain not using only a moment-to-moment sequence of the information, but brain let them wait, and in order to incorporate the future moments to understand a more free, more consistent understanding of the world. So the time window for this illusion is very limited, and a few hundred milliseconds or up to couples of seconds, which is roughly correspond to the so-called window present. So did Bergson have that in mind? It is not plausible, but wait, read this quote. Car tout événement doit souvenir s'est imprimé dans la mémoire, si simple qu'on cela suppose, a occupé un certain temps. Les perceptions qui ont rempli la première période de cet intervalle et qui forment maintenant avec les perceptions consécutives un souvenir indivisé étaient donc véritablement en l'air, en attendant. Tant que la partie décisive de l'événement n'était pas encore produite. Voilà. Donc, so he is very much thinking about this type of phenomenon. So this is not just one by one from the earlier to the following, not that. So this cannot be done without the huge breadth of temporal structure. So, and I introduced this is Japanese word, sorry, the ODI determination or ODI model of this. So ODI is a Japanese word which comprises very useful for me because Bergson's notion he rephrases to this phenomena. For example, I quote this quotation. Ce retard causé par la nécessité où se trouve le schéma d'amener graduellement les images multiples d'élémentaires à un nouveau modus vivendi entre elles. Ce retard sui generis qui est fait de tâtonnement, d'essais plus ou moins fluctuants, d'adaptation des images au schéma et du schéma aux images, d'interférence, de superposition des images entre elles. Donc, so this is not the one by one, just a very natural course of things, but you need to tâtonnement, so you need to try and error, so you might go back and to see how it goes. So, and in Japanese, what ODI means includes these almost all notions. So tâtonnement and adaptation, interference. So I use in this book. So our lived present is always fulfilled with this kind of sui generis delay. So our temporal breadth present window is always tâtonnement. So which creates a sense of uncertainty and immediacy at the same time that we feel only in the real time present. So this cannot be expressed by tense, just the Anglo-Saxon philosophers of time is using. The following Sugiyama, Professor Sugiyama, it is appropriate to use the distinction based on aspect. So determined one by one by a linear sequence. This is a very usual notion of temporal sequence, and I qualified it as a heuristic aspect, and whereas Bergson's more ODI way of determination is should be called imperfective aspect. So, which is producing but not finishing. So, in the middle there opens imperfective aspect of time. Okay, that was the second part. And finally, the pure memory. So the third phase. So there you can see the multiple quotations from our personality is made out of whole our past experiences. This is a kind of very huge one of contraction, and we live 100 years. So this will be a billions of seconds, and these experiences are contracted into your personality or character. And en passant, I would like to mention that this notion is a very you can find in a time and free way already, very of course undeveloped form, because the deeper self is made out of our past history, and our surface of self is dissolving into one another, still retaining something to mutual externity. And between that, there is a degree of the interpenetration. So Bergson is already mentioning about this idea. So, and we have very deep and complex questions about pure memory, but I need to quit here. So I would like to note that only the last point. So localization and temporal correlation. So when you remember some particular event, you need to localize the memory, and this localization process is differentiated from the retrieving itself. This is already done by Ribot, Theodore Ribot, and so, but it is always in our understanding these two are how to say mingled, but in very important part this and how to localize. So you retrieve the memory, but you need to localize. So in time, of course. So and Bergson uses in the lecture of the Histoire de théorie de la mémoire. He makes certainly an allusion to the Lotze, so the notion of a local sign. So the local sign is in the spatial version of this. So once we perceive some sensation, but we need to localize in space. So Lotze thought that this itself, the sensation itself, has some mark of the particular space. Particular location in space. And the same thing Bergson is considering in this lecture. So once we retrieve some souvenir, so memory, so but we need to localize. So that where to localize is told by the souvenir itself. So as a nuance or correlation. And I listed up in my book about unsolved points of interpretation about pure memory comes to 10, and a problem of mechanism, a problem of compatibility, and a target problem, and a scope problem. The scope of preservation is universal or individual, and an activity problem, order problem, of temporal localization, which I mentioned above, and a banalization problem. Banal is also an important word, but used already in the Ribot, and a transition problem. And in the multi-time scale interpretation, I kind of answered this, not at all, but not completely, but I feel like some I would say coherent understanding of that. But and okay, this is a comparison with contemporary time ontologies and against multi-time scale structure interpreted Bergson. So, okay, I end this today's talk. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yasushi, for this very rich conference, which gives us many hints for the discussion. I already have one, and I had it from the beginning. I just start before, of course, leaving the floor to the room. But I had it from the beginning of your conference when you quoted Matière Mémoire, this, and you said that there is a force intérieure qui permet de retenir de mieux en mieux le passé, d'anticiper l'avenir. Je me souviens pas le mot exact. Anyway, and I thought of the definition that Bergson gives of personality in the course on personality of 1910, I think, saying that only human beings can be said to have personality because of this strength of this strength to retain the tension of all these different levels of the past. And then you returned on the topic of personality at the end of your. Of course, it would be very interesting to read your book to go deeper in this topic. But I was thinking about the possibility to have different levels of tension for and so maybe different levels of personality in different living beings. You made some examples that made an echo of the tick, phonics tick that Hirai treated in his lesson last Thursday. And of course, that would be interesting to see how maybe different levels of personality and of impersonality maybe interact in also in not only in intersubjective communication and interaction, but also in interspecific communication and sympathy. And so, and I was also very attentive to the use of the word personality and not person. Which is also quite relevant, I think, in Bergson's choice, since many are contesting some very personalist readings of Bergson that have dominated the first decades of his reception. So I just wanted to know what you think about it and if you have already worked on that.
Okay.
Thank you again for this.
Thank you very much for this question. So as I talked in these presentations, I'm not thinking the human being is. I'm not tending to say that the human is special in this natural universe. So of course, in a sense, this is special because we have developed, as I showed in this structure. So the temporal structure is developed in several different ways. And as you said, so for example, the insect have probably has less structurized time scales. So, and maybe some animals has only a second level in my expression, or only first levels. So this varies depending on the evolutionary lineage of this extension memories evolution. So I draw only one single, for the people in the, so I'm talking about this picture. So is it okay? Yeah, for Zoom people, it's not messing up. So, and I'm saying I'm depicted, of course, only one lineage to go up to us, so human being, but the different lineage, for example, insect, should not have been passed this way. For example, more they use only, as I mentioned, as a fly is a very tinier time scale. So there are a variety of the complexity of the time scale structure depending on the animals, which I expected that. And that human being, so what is characteristic of that? So of course, this is how to say, the huge complexity, well, enormously huge complexity of the temporal structure. So thanks to the third level, and this is not, the third level can be given on plenty of different animals, but we use these levels as a memory, so episodic memory or attentive recognition. So just our past is not given as it is, but we use and we rotate and we translate into our present. So, and thus our present experiences is much more, how to say, becomes much more complex, and that's why we have these inventions. And I think that Bergson is talking about this creativity thanks to the movability, or how to say, you can move, you can have the different planes of memories. So you can always, you have only what you have. That is, for example, me, that is a certain amount of years of time. So that's why I can afford. That's all I can afford, but I can reorganize the same amount of past experience into different forms of images projected into perceptual world. So in the Bergson, he developed this idea in the third chapter of matter and memory. So you can moving back and forth to recreate your own mental organization. So this is not fixed at all. This is not simply given a priori. It is it can be changed by yourself to organization. You cannot pick up anything from the outside. You need to explain experience, but from the certain amount of your experience, you can draw the different shapes of your images or understandings of the world. So that's why the creativity is important from Bergson's. Yeah. So, and in the creativity is thanks to the past experience, not so not despite of the past experience. So this is the important part of it. And interspecies communication, the possibility of interspecies communication, I cannot say a certain thing with certainty, but anything with certainty. But yeah, I have a theoretical possibility to have this, because of course there is a question of sympathy, and I maybe I will talk in the Wednesday. I took the notion of a motor memory to make these different notions in connection, such as of course habit and instinct, on intelligence and closed society. So maybe our experience is not bounded in our, so to speak, in personal space, but we can go to beyond. This is the scope of the theory of a perception, pure perception theory. So so I believe it can be modeled in this picture about interspecies or how to say personal direct perception. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And so I ask if you have more questions. Oh, yes, of course.
Très important, c'est qu'il peut
Yeah,
discuter en français aussi.
Yes, oui, c'est vrai.
Ah oui.
Yasushi peut aussi discuter en français. Je vois, en fait, il y a 2 questions dans la salle Zoom, mais vous levez la main aussi si vous en avez, mais je donne déjà la parole à Thomas Bourdier. Attends.
Voilà. Alors, vous m'entendez bien? C'est bon? Oui? OK. Donc, merci beaucoup pour cette intervention. C'était vraiment très riche et intéressant. Je travaille aussi sur le bergsonisme analytique, disons, et je ne suis pas sûr d'avoir exactement la même approche que vous. Donc, c'était intéressant. Ma question porterait sur la question du tout de l'univers, ou du moins du tout de la matière. Vous avez dit que l'approche par les échelles de temps multiples court-circuitait en quelque sorte l'ontologie traditionnelle du temps, telle qu'elle est pratiquée dans la philosophie analytique. Et je voulais savoir si toutes ces questions de qu'est-ce que le présent, est-ce que le passé existe, est-ce que le futur existe, finalement, n'étaient pas réintroduites ou conservées au niveau du tout de la matière, au niveau du tout de l'univers. Par exemple, peut-être qu'on ne dirait pas est-ce que le passé existe absolument, mais on dirait est-ce que le passé de l'univers matériel existe, et finalement, ça revient un petit peu au même. Je ne sais pas si ma question est claire. Qu'est-ce que vous répondriez à ça? Voilà, merci beaucoup. Pardon, mais je n'entends pas la réponse parce que Yasushi Hiraï n'a pas réactivé son micro.
Ah, désolé. Voilà. Voilà. Désolé. Alors, vous pouvez regarder cette image-là, ce schéma-là. Donc, au niveau 0, la matière, c'est donc l'univers matériel n'occupe qu'un seul instant, qu'un seul moment. Donc, s'il n'y a qu'un seul, donc ce schéma déjà dessine après la mémoire extensive, mémoire extension à appliquer, donc déjà développer l'univers a déjà cette structure very complexe. Voilà, donc on peut utiliser notre mémoire pour comprendre comment ça se passe dans l'univers matériel. Mais si cette structure temporelle n'était pas bâtie, n'était pas structurisée, donc à ce moment-là, on n'a qu'un seul niveau, c'est-à-dire le niveau 0. À ce moment-là, la matière n'a pas de mémoire, donc il n'y a qu'un seul moment. Donc, il n'y a que de présent, pour ainsi dire, Mais peut-être à ce moment-là, on ne peut pas utiliser le mot présent parce que ça n'a rien, ça n'a pas de sens en ce moment-là, parce qu'il n'y a qu'un seul moment. Donc, Bergson explique ça en utilisant, en exprimant, par exemple, la matière, la répétition, et en citant Leibniz, la matière n'a pas de mémoire, c'est-à-dire c'est la répétition. Voilà, c'est-à-dire la matière tout entière n'est pas n'étant pas dans une certaine épaisseur du temps. Voilà. Donc, il n'y a qu'un seul moment qui pourrait être dit en présent, mais il n'y a pas de passé, il n'y a pas de futur, tout simplement. Mais après, c'est structure, ce métaphysique structure, et c'est bâti, et on peut concevoir l'histoire de la matière, comme fait des physiciens, tout le monde fait. Est-ce que ça marche, ma réponse pour toi, pour vous? Donc, ça dépend de la structure.
Je suis pas sûr d'être convaincu, en tout cas, que ce soit l'avis de Bergson, parce qu'il y a quand même des passages, notamment dans l'évolution créatrice, le début de l'évolution créatrice sur le tout de l'univers, où Bergson ne le dit jamais clairement, parce que je pense qu'il n'en était pas sûr, parce que pour lui, il n'y avait pas suffisamment c'est pas quelque chose dont on peut avoir une preuve qu'il y ait un passé de l'univers en soi qui se conserve, qu'il y ait vraiment une mémoire ontologique. Mais il semblait dire que par le raisonnement, on pouvait arriver à l'idée que l'univers dure, et l'idée que l'univers dure, c'est l'idée que son passé se prolonge dans son présent, au moins en un certain sens, même dans un sens minimal ou incompréhensible pour nous. Donc, je comprends ce que vous dites et je comprends le point de vue, mais pour moi, c'est presque comme si on en restait presque au niveau de laisser sur les données immédiates de la conscience, quoi, avec cette espèce de distorsion irréconciliable entre l'esprit et le monde extérieur, le monde matériel. Et peut-être qu'après, c'est la seule solution possible, parce qu'aujourd'hui, il y a la relativité restreinte, il y a enfin, déjà autant de Bergson, mais peut-être que c'est ça la solution, finalement, c'est d'en rester à ce divorce. Mais après, je ne suis pas sûr que ce soit ce que Bergson pensait. Mais bon, après, peu importe ce que Bergson pensait, si on a une meilleure solution en faisant ça. Voilà ce que j'en pense, mais c'est pas, je ne veux pas non plus monopoliser la parole ou ouvrir un débat là-dessus, mais je vous remercie de votre réponse.
Merci beaucoup. Ouais. Peut-être je voudrais ajouter quelque chose, mais quand même, oui.
Joël, vous pouvez poser votre question, s'il vous plaît.
Hello, Yasushi. You can hear me? Yes? Okay. Thanks for your presentation. In fact, it seems to me that the most important point of your presentation is to say that Bergson's ontology is a neutral monism. I think that all your presentation is based on this important point. And so on this point, I have two questions. The first question is to know what the main what are the main references to Bergson for this interpretation. It seems to me that your main reference is a text in chapter 1 of Matter and Memory, saying that something can be considered as matter or perception depending on two different kinds of relations. If I have well understood this point, so it is my first question. What are your main references for this interpretation? And my second question is, in fact, do you say that this ontology is very similar to what we find in William James, saying, in fact, that are supporting the idea that what is real is neither mind nor matter, but just something natural and depending on two different kinds of relations. It seems to me that it is the word, the question of relation, which is central in James.
Okay, thank you very much, Joel. So I know very well you wrote a paper about panpsychism, and of course we invited you to name my PBJ theory, and so you were very interested in this dualism problem. So thank you very much for this comment and questioning. And my reference, what is my reference? So as I said in my talk, of course, the matter and memory chapter 1 is the main source. But I have, for example, already shown that the multiplicity theory is not. It's very interpreted as a dualist theory. But as I showed in my text, so I'm not denying the dualist because I said as regarding the material, it is only interaction, neutral interaction. So materially monist, but operationally dualist. So there are two different operations in nature, and that is I will develop further in Wednesday's talk. That will be the extension memory on the one hand and the motor memory on the other hand. And these two transformation of temporal structure, these two are totally different operations of temporal changing or altering temporal structure. So I'm thinking about these two irreducible operations produces the richness of Bergson's philosophy. So just I'm saying the monist, neutral monist, just regarding the material of these things, because without that, the question is only formal things. So we cannot only talk about correlations. So I may not want to ending up this conclusion. So, and Bergson is very much aware of that problem. That's why I quoted from the Julian simultaneity. So as far as the materials is in question, the interaction is yes, monist can be understood as a neutral monism. Am I answering your question?
Yes, but in fact, just partially, because what I want to know is what you call operation. Is it what you call operation? Is it a relation, in fact, a kind of relation between the different elements of the neutral material, which is the thesis supported by James. The elements are neutral, and the relations between these elements can be of two kinds, which are matter or mind. Is it your interpretation?
Okay, thank you. So the answer is no. So the relational approach is not sufficient, I think. So interaction is already relation. So the relation is there. So how to change the structure of this interaction or relation is the point. So extension memory, it extends the broadness, so the scope of the interaction in the temporal dimension. So you need to solve the question a totally new question. And motor memory has at the task of that. So you need to, in the repetition, you need to find some solution in the trial and error. So these two kind of memory has a totally different ways of transforming the structure of the interaction, which I will discuss in Wednesday if you can come. So we continue to discuss.
Donc, est-ce qu'il y a d'autres questions? Merci beaucoup pour cette discussion déjà. Arnaud François?
Thank you very much. I have one question about your analysis of the idea of qualité, quantité, quality, quantity. You connected the idea of quantity with the idea of difference de degré, difference of degree, and quality with difference of nature. Would you go so far as to say that quality is nothing else but a difference of nature, and quantity nothing else but difference of degree? Would you say that? Which is interesting, really interesting.
Yeah, I would say that.
Okay.
Yeah. So as I said, ontologically, there's only neutral interaction. So the universe is full of interaction. And so we leave the interaction. So, but in the interaction, you need to distinguish something. So what to interact? So you use selection. So this is defined by the history, so motor memory. So each species has a different lineage, so different shape of the distinguishing memory, which result in the different landscapes of the perceptual space. So it is defined how interaction is modified and differentiated from the basic physical plane interaction space. So this kind of I know I'm very conscious about it sounds a little too abstract maybe, but yeah, but in order to take Bergson's philosophy seriously, I would like to I think we're going to this conclusion to as a picture of this Bergson universe. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So are there more questions? Il y a d'autres questions?
On peut parler. Oui, voilà.
En tout cas, non, nous savons aussi que nous avons maintenant la possibilité de continuer autour d'un repas et puis on a encore jusqu'à mercredi pour réfléchir à cette séance si intense et pour continuer avec Yasushi la deuxième partie de son séminaire, Perspectives on the Hybridization of Time, Canalization of Typified Images and Universal Time. Il se tiendra ici même à 14h mercredi. Voilà.
Merci beaucoup.
Merci pour la discussion.
Merci beaucoup. Merci beaucoup.
Merci tout le monde. Merci Thomas, merci Joël, merci Marine. Au revoir. À mercredi.